use my throat, so please bear with me. So, I'll just read a passage from Jeremiah 50. It kind of captures believe it or not, captures a great portion of the book of Revelation, starting in verse 33. This is what the Lord Almighty says. The people of Israel are oppressed, and the people of Judah as well. All their captors hold them fast, refusing to let them go. Yet their Redeemer is strong. The Lord Almighty is his name. He will vigorously defend their cause, so that he may bring rest to their land. But unrest to those who live in Babylon. A sword against the Babylonians, declares the Lord, against those who live in Babylon, and against her officials and wise men. A sword against her false prophets, that they become fools. A sword against their warriors, they will be filled with terror. A sword against her horses and chariots, and all the foreigners in her ranks, they will become weaklings. A sword against her treasures, they will be plundered. A drought on her waters, they will dry up, for it is a land of idols, idols that will go mad with terror. So desert creatures and hyenas will live there, and there the owl will dwell. They will never again be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. As I overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, along with their neighboring towns, declares the Lord, so no one will live there, and people will dwell in it. So, the book of Revelation is there to show the church that the world's evil system will come to an end. And there are so many ways to talk about that, a lot of them in symbol. And chapter 14 goes into some of those symbols. So the pattern of the chapter is that it's three parts. The first part is a flash forward to Jesus' throne on Mount Zion. That's in verses 1 to 5. Then the next section, 6 to 13, is a flashback to warnings from angels. Now remember, at this point in the narrative, we're already at the seventh trumpet, right? And we're all preparing for 7 final plagues. And then the third part is a flash forward to 2 harvests, symbolizing kind of the end of the age. You can think of that as Jesus' several parables about harvests. So chapter 14, verse 1, Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like the loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. So you can call them the orchestra of the thundering harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. Now, we've seen that number before, haven't we? 144,000. So John hears a number, but he turns and he sees a multitude that nobody could count from all nations. It's the same 144,000 here. The whole multitude is gathered around him on Mount Zion. Note the location, Mount Zion. This isn't okay, everybody gathers up and we all go off to heaven. Well, no, they're at Mount Zion. Something's going on here. Verse 4. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. It's quite an interesting description, very symbolic. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. So what does this didn't defile themselves with women mean? We're going to talk about literal virgins. No. There's a symbolism here about adultery sexual and spiritual adultery. For instance, Revelation 2, speaking to the church in Pergamum, says, "Nevertheless, I have a few things against you. There are some among you who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality." So the incident that he's referring to goes back to Numbers chapter 25. While Israel was staying in Shittim, men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to sacrifices to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. So Israel yoked themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. So the symbolism is that there is a kind of adultery that can happen, and these people avoided that. They are pure in spirit and totally devoted to the Lord, totally devoted to Jesus. Then there's that expression, first fruits. It's a biblical expression rooted in the harvest season of Israel. You offered the very first of your ripe grain or your ripe fruit, any crop that you were growing. Some of it ripens first. That's just the way it happens. And you offer that to the Lord, who then blesses the rest of your harvest. So the use of that expression kind of implies that this is kind of the first harvest, right? This is the first offering to the Lord, that there is more to come. And so notice that in verses 1 to 5 that Jesus is now headquartered in Jerusalem. This is not a people who were with Jesus in heaven. Jesus has a throne on Mount Zion. And I say headquartered, he's not stationed there. You can't follow Jesus, quote, wherever he goes if he doesn't go, right? He's got things to do, he's got places to go, and his headquarters is in Jerusalem. But gates open both ways. So he is ruling on earth, is what I'm trying to say, but you don't just rule by sitting on the throne. Okay, we'll move on to verse 6 now. "And I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people." So it seems that even if our message doesn't get out, God makes it get out anyway. And I've heard stories of where people have been visiting in other countries and discovered Christians who became Christians because God appeared to them in a dream. They had never heard of Jesus before, and as soon as they stumble across somebody who believes in Jesus, they want to find out what's going on, so they come. So God can work even without us if he needs to and wants to, but he just loves it when we work with him. Verse 7, he said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." Why specifically those things? Well, for us, the good news is God's time of judgment has arrived. The proper response is to fear God and give him glory, and worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water. Now recall that in chapter 7, God had held back 4 angels so that they wouldn't hurt the sea, the land, and the trees until the full number of saints are sealed. This is in chapter 7, right? So they're specifically mentioning those parts of the world that are going to be affected. Chapter 8, those 4 angels, or 4 trumpet plagues happened that harm the trees, the earth, and even darkens the heavens. This is a reminder of the plagues that have already gone on and that will intensify. It's a reminder of the announcement of the 7th trumpet. The time of judgment has arrived. And whatever their attitude toward Jesus and his Father, they have to acknowledge that God is, I love to use this expression, God is and Jesus are large and in charge. They are ruling. God made all things. He can unmake whatever he wants to unmake at his pleasure. So in verse 8, a second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." So there we go with this adultery idea. The people who follow Jesus don't fall for this adultery. The second angel announces the fall of Babylon the Great. Now, up until now, if we were reading the book of Revelation for the first time, we'd start asking ourselves, well, what's Babylon the Great? We kind of have an idea of Babylon, the ancient city, and we might suspect it has something to do with this great city that our Savior was killed in, maybe. But more likely it has something to do with the woman who is riding the beast. But again, if you're reading it for the first time, we wouldn't know necessarily. The book of Revelation likes to point ahead to things. Give you a phrase here. Hey, wait a minute, I haven't seen this before. What's it talking about? And then you find the explanation later on. There's a lot of that happens in chapter 14. So the Bible speaks of adultery in national terms when Israel, for instance, seeks to ally itself with other nations. Sometimes they ally themselves with Egypt, sometimes with Babylon, sometimes with Assyria. Any kind of mutual defense treaties with other seemingly more powerful nations. Some examples of that are in Ezekiel 16, verses 26 to 30. The entire book of Hosea is an analogy. It's an analogy of God and his wife who keeps running away from him and coming back. That's a kind of spiritual adultery, nationally speaking. Okay, verse 9. A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or in their hand," notice how specific this is, "they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. There will be no rest day or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name." This calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. So, what's going on here? Especially in verse 11, the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. And anytime I see a discussion of the doctrine of hell, this passage comes up as one of the torments that comes along. But I want to do something that's very important here. He gives us the perfect opportunity, this verse, to refine our skill at reading the Bible the way that it was intended to be written, to be read. The technical word is hermeneutics. You can call it biblical interpretation techniques. Okay? I want to talk about context. Context here is very important to understand this verse. So there are glimpses of punishment. They will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. So this ties the beast and its image to the imagery of Babylon the Great. It's a very similar punishment. God is rendering judgment on the, quote, maddening wine of her adulteries with his own wine of fury. You have this thing, and then God judges using something very similar, right? And the wrath itself actually starts in chapter 15. Second thing is they will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. So it adds more detail about the contents of the cup of God's fury. And it seems to warn about the fourth bowl plague of Revelation 16, verses 8 to 9. Since it's against those with the mark who worship the beast, and is meted out in the presence of the Lamb and his holy angels. I'll get to reading the very passage I'm referring to there in a moment. Then it says, the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. So that smoke is based on the torment of burning sulfur in the cup of It seems to refer again to the plagues of chapters 16 and 18. And you'll see that in a moment. Now the other thing is, it's hard to imagine an eternity of literal smoke rising from torment by the time you get to Revelation 21. Because now you've got a whole new earth. And is there smoke rising from people's torment in the new heavens and new earth? But we'll see more about that smoke in a moment. And there will be no rest day or night. Believe it or not, that occurs in the fifth trumpet plague of the tormenting locust sting. And also the first bowl plague with the gnawing agony of the fifth bowl plague of darkness as well. So there's agony enough in the rest of the book of Revelation, specific to the people with the mark of the beast and who worship that beast. Okay, so smoke rising, symbolic language. It rises in other prophetic works. For instance, Isaiah 9 verse 8, Psalm 37 verse 20, Isaiah 34 verse 10, Hosea 13 verse 3, and it usually refers to seeing smoke as a sign or signal of destruction. In fact, Abraham saw the smoke of Sodom's destruction from quite a distance away. He was rather hoping that his cousin, or his nephew Lot, wasn't being, burned up in that fire. That is actually the basis for that symbol, is watching the smoke of the complete destruction of Sodom. And that imagery is used exactly the same way for Babylon the Great in chapter 18. So, Revelation 18 verse 9, when the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they'll stand far off and cry, "Woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come." In case you were wondering how long this torment lasts, the analogy changes in verse 21 of Revelation 18. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea, and said, "With such violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, pipers and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No worker of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again." And it just goes on and on about stuff that's not going to happen there anymore. Verses 23. The light of the lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of the bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's most important people. By your magic spell, all nations were led astray. Verse 24 is a key here. In her was found the blood of prophets and of God's holy people, of all who have been slaughtered on the earth. There's a judgment going on here, but it's a specific judgment. And the key to that happens in the verse just before this, verses 21 to 24 that I've just read. Verse 20 says, "Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, you people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets, for God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you." Catch that. God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you. The blood of the prophets, the blood of the people of God is on her. God is judging with the same judgment. It's a temporal punishment on a people of a certain time and place. And there's a reason specific to that judgment. It's capital punishment, just like Genesis chapter 9. It's an eye for an eye, just like in Moses. The punishment fits the crime. That's how God judges. The punishment fits the crime. And the context of this particular judgment is very specific. So theologians use that imagery as a proof text to understand the doctrine of hell. Unfortunately, the context of the entire punishment series is payback for the torment and death of Jesus' saints by the evil empire. So what do they get? They get torment. What do they get? They get death. as stated in chapter 18, verse 20, the purpose of all this torment and death is to punish the evil empire with the judgments imposed on the people of God. It's not an eternal judgment. So my advice to those who want to use passages, who want to systematize doctrines, don't use Revelation 14, verse 11 to define or refine your doctrine of hell. You need to find other scriptures that are in the right context to do that properly. So now, verse 12. The call for patient endurance of the saints is reinforced by God's announcement of the punishments reserved for those who worship the beast and receive the mark. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that war. That's the message. And whatever punishments we bear in resisting the beast don't compare to the punishment of those who renounce Jesus during this time. So in verse 13, then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." Catch that? This is the context. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them. So, two things we learn. We learn that this section is in three parts. I've only covered two. We don't have time for the third section. We'll take that next time. But we've learned that God's punishment is just. His punishment fits the crime. And we've also learned one lesson, I hope, of how to read the Bible in context.